progress on this. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to, we are, as I had said earlier, announced earlier, if there's anyone who's come in since then, we are moving item number 13 regarding the library and the electrical subcontractor situation. We are moving that to the July 16th meeting. So now we're going to move on to item number 14, which is an approval of a resolution certifying an addendum to the 2014 General Plan Environmental Impact Report, approval of Master Development Plan, and authorization for the City Manager to issue a request for proposals for the disposition and development of Parcel Group 5, which is commonly known as Bunker Hill. So on this, we are going to start with a report from our Deputy City Manager, Ms. Ott.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members, Deputy City Manager Jennifer Ott. Is the PowerPoint up? It's up there? There we go. Great. So as you mentioned, there's a number of actions we're taking tonight to move forward the sale and then ultimate development of Parcel Group 5 as part of the Caltrans property called Bunker Hill. So I'm going to start with the background, some of the goals, a little bit of the outreach, and then I'm going to turn it over to John Stefanski, and then I'm going to wrap it up at the end to talk a little bit about the Planning Commission comments and some of their comments for your consideration. And go quickly through this. Obviously, there's a long history here in terms of these properties, starting in the 1960s with the Route 238 bypass project not moving forward and ultimately being transferred from Caltrans to the city for development. And the city in 2017 entered into a contract with Design Workshop, a consultant, to help put together master development plans for these parcels. This is the first one that is coming before you. It's gone through a pretty extensive community process, and we'll walk through that a little bit. But here to essentially get that plan approved and then ultimately sell the land, bring on a private partner, sell the land, and move forward with development. This is just an overview for those watching and just a summary of the 10 parcels that the city have been transferred to the city for development. And the project goals, things that we really are guiding us throughout this process. One is really when the city takes ownership of land and has public land, it has a lot more control over the type of development and being able to really leverage the value of the land and the land itself for community benefits, can have a more cohesive development. And that's really what we've tried to do by taking the reins and putting a community plan together to be able to produce something that fits with the community and the neighborhood. Other goals are obviously to eliminate neighborhood blight, and that was the case here where we had old deteriorated buildings that were problematic, and we've been able to demolish a number of those and really try to eliminate blight on some of these parcels. Negotiate real estate transactions at no net cost to the city, and really with the hope of being able to take the sale proceeds and use them for public benefits, as was being discussed at the previous item, and then has already been used in terms of the sale of parcels 1 and 10 for helping to fund the navigation center in the industrial area. So those are ways that you can leverage the value of the land for other public benefits. So outreach and feedback. We've involved a number of one-on-one stakeholder meetings, neighborhood meetings, community meetings, public work sessions. So we held a neighborhood meeting in the neighborhood itself at the home. Colleen right there, thank you. Colleen has hosted 2 neighborhood meetings where John and I have attended and presented and talked to the neighbors, probably a good 15 to 20 neighbors at each of those sessions. A community-wide meeting in November, and then a planning commission work session, another neighborhood meeting in March, a neighborhood meeting for Parcel Group 6, which actually was close by, so we ended up receiving more comments from some of the neighbors from Parcel Group 5, which is why that's up here tonight. And then we had a planning commission essentially a session a couple weeks ago as well that's not up here. So what we heard from the community throughout that feedback was really maintaining just feeling really strongly about the rural character of the neighborhood and how important it is that there are existing homes there, existing neighborhood, and not to do something that really undermines that rural character of the neighborhood. And a lot of neighbors, and this will be one of the issues we circle back to at the end that isn't necessarily 100% resolved, but not only wanting the rural character, but preserving the existing zoning, which says a minimum of 20,000 square foot lot. So that's about a half 1.5 acre, in case you're curious how much that is, and then a 30% maximum lot coverage. That when we talk about lot coverage, that means how much of the building footprint covers the lot. But a lot of consensus about constructing new public amenities like the Foothill Trail, and that's been through all of the neighborhood meetings, community meetings, preserving open space for wildlife. In fact, we've made some changes where we're trying to create some wildlife corridors throughout here, not just the trail, but also east-west, so that you really allow wildlife to traverse both east-west and north-south, providing adequate on and off-street parking so that you don't have that spillover parking into existing neighborhoods, minimizing traffic impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods, and then constructing, and these go together really, 5 and 6 here, constructing additional site access for both construction and then vehicular access to Carlos B from Bunker Hill Boulevard. And what that does is really, if you don't add that access, a lot of the cars travel through the existing neighborhood to get out to Harder Road. By creating that Carlos B access, that'll be a more direct access out of the parcel, and you'll have a lot more traffic going out that way instead of through the existing neighborhood. So we see this really 6 as a way of helping to achieve 5 on this list of minimizing those traffic impacts on the neighborhood. So I'm going to turn it over to John, who's going to go through the property overview, and then I'll come back when we're talking about kind of the final issues.
All right, thank you, Jen. So Parcel Group 5 is a roughly 37-acre site that's currently designated in the general plan as suburban density residential, which gets about 1 to 4 units per acre. It's also a housing element site, which under the housing element, it was estimated that the assumed capacity of the site would be about 80 moderate income units for the site. It's also currently zoned residential natural preserve, which provides for 20,000 square foot lots, the 30% maximum lot coverage ratio, as Jen was just talking about, as well as the Special District 7, which requires that a segment of the Hayward Foothill Trail be developed on the site. The primary constraints of the site is its topography and slope. It's a very steep site. It has limited access, primarily through Westview Way and Central Boulevard, and has some issues with fault zones. So there's a portion on the western side that requires some further geotechnical exploration to determine if there is a fault zone there. So the master development plan is what we've been working with the community over the last pretty much almost over a year now. And the master development plan is what outlines the proposed vision for the redevelopment of the parcel group. The project description outlined in this master development plan is what guided the environmental documents that went with this plan. So the first portion of the plan is covering open space and trails. So any redevelopment on the site will provide 10.5 acres of designated open space, and that's predominantly in the northern and southern riparian areas, as well as 3,000 linear feet of the Hayward Foothill Trail. The Hayward Foothill Trail would be constructed by the selected developer, which would then be owned either by HARD or the local HOA. And then the HOA itself would have, or some other property basis fee would be used to fund the maintenance of the trail. And the maintenance for the entire trail, not just in Parcel Group 5, but throughout all the 238 properties, would then be managed holistically by HARD. So this is just a rendering of that SD7 alignment of the Foothill Trail. As you can see, it's approximately just over 5 miles long. And then specifically for the site, the trail will wind its way up Bunker Hill Boulevard and then kind of parallel track with the boundary with Cal State East Bay. And then there are some renderings there as well as to what the proposed condition would look like. And again, just another rendering of what that trail would look like. Yeah, Photoshop. The next section is streets and circulation. So when you drive up on Bunker Hill, it's very clear that the existing roadways will need to be replaced in its entirety. And so the new roads will include wider drive lanes, rolled curbs, public parking, gutters, sidewalks, landscaping, and then on-street parking with approximately 50 spaces on Bunker Hill Boulevard, and then another 25 on Maitland Drive, so 75 total on-street spaces. Again, here's just a rendering of how the streets will be aligned in comparison to the homes. The homes each will have 2 to 3 car garages, as well as 2 car driveway aprons for additional parking. So the next section in the master development plan provides context for the land use and development of the site. And so getting at what we've heard from the community, one of the key pieces is that the future development has to maintain that rural character of the surrounding neighborhood. And so keeping that in mind, the master development plan sets a maximum unit count of 74 single-family homes plus 8 deed-restricted accessory dwelling units. The future developers will need to rezone to allow for a denser lot configuration that achieves a 5,000 to 20,000 square foot lot size range with an average of 10,000 square foot lots, consistent with the general plan. The lot coverage would range in a ratio from 30 to 40%, and then there would be a 60-foot to 100-foot lot frontage requirement. The plan assumes an average home size of around 3,500 square feet, including those 2 to 3 car garages I mentioned earlier. And per the request from the community, the development will incorporate wildlife corridors to allow the local wildlife to continue to traverse the site. Again, here's just another rendering of what the redevelopment would look like. The selected developer will need to replace all utility infrastructure. Bunker Hill lacks full sewer and storm water infrastructure for the entire length of the road, of all the lots on the roadway. And the current electric and communication lines are not undergrounded, so that's another consideration, that the utilities would be undergrounded in the joint trench for the new development. And that would include utilities, communications, internet fiber, but per feedback that we received at the CEDC about a month or so ago, we will not include gas utilities for any of the new development. However, existing residents will be able to retain their gas utility. So the second piece to the master development plan is the request for proposal process. And as a landowner, the city has the ability to set specific development requirements in addition to what is outlined in the master development plan. The RFP process is intended to solicit the best proposals from the development community that meet the vision of the master development plan and the requirements that are then listed out in the RFP. So the process for this will begin following approval this evening and through a staff and community driven process. We'll winnow down a short list of developers and make a recommendation to the City Council to then authorize the city manager to enter into exclusive negotiations with that selected developer. So diving into the development requirements in the RFP, the first is, again, just reiterating the Foothill Trail and the parkland dedication requirements. So the developers are going to have to construct the 16-foot wide multi-use trail throughout their proposed development. The second gets to affordable housing requirements. And so under the current affordable housing ordinance, a development has to provide affordable units equal to either 10% of the total units for for sale units or 7% of the total units for rentals. Or they have the option to pay an affordable housing in lieu fee, or they can provide an alternative approach that exceeds those requirements. Any on-site units need to be similar units to those of the market rate that are being provided. So given this, this development will be limited to large lot single-family homes averaging 3,500 square feet, and providing like units of that size and nature are highly subsidized single-family homes that at below market prices is not the most appropriate application of the affordable housing ordinance, given other smaller product types make more sense for the housing needs of the Hayward community. And so to accomplish the development of on-site affordable units, we have developed options for developers to satisfy the city's affordable housing requirements. The first and the preferred option is for the developer to construct deed-restricted ADUs in an amount equal to 10% of their total unit count. Since those ADUs are not like units, the developer will then have to pay 50% of the affordable in lieu fee on the remaining 90% of their total unit count. If they don't want to pursue that first option, then the developer can propose an alternative that meets or exceeds the thresholds of that first option, but we in the RFP allow developers to become creative with that, but again, making sure that they're meeting those the intent of the affordable housing ordinance. So at 74 units, this would yield the 8 ADUs, as we mentioned before, plus another $1.6 million in lieu fee revenue. The third requirement gets at green development, and so developers have to incorporate green building and landscaping elements that reduce the use of energy, water, natural resources. And so that includes making homes solar ready, and if not completely solar powered, and that no gas utilities will be included again for those new homes. The fourth RFP requirement is regarding transportation demand management. So developers will be required to propose and implement a TDM program to help essentially encourage residents to utilize alternative modes of transportation outside of their own cars. And granted, the site is in a peculiar spot. It's something that we still want to press developers on to make sure that we're doing everything we can as a city to encourage folks to take public transportation and get out of using their own cars. And then lastly, the RFP articulates a Hayward resident priority preference plan. So developers will need to include a plan which grants a priority preference for Hayward residents to purchase or lease market rate units in instances where all other financial considerations are equal, if possible. It has to be pursuant to all applicable state and federal fair housing laws, and as a part of the RFP, developers must state any impact of this program on their overall purchase price. So environmental review and the anticipated entitlements for the project included in the staff report this evening is an addendum to the general plan environmental impact report, under the addendum's environmental checklist, the proposed project is within the scope of the 2014 EIR and has no new or more severe significant effects, and no new mitigation measures are required. So therefore, no subsequent or supplemental EIR or further SEQA review is required prior to approval of the proposed project. So with that in mind, the anticipated entitlements for a developer would be a site plan review, a zoning amendment, again to allow for the diversity of lot sizes between that 5,000 and 20,000 square foot lot range with an average of 10,000 square foot lots and a maximum of 40% lot coverage, a tentative map, and a final map. And so now I'll hand it off to Jen to just discuss feedback and next steps.
So just quickly, some of this was alluded to, but we did take this to the Council Economic Development Committee, and there was support for the overall unit count of the 74 single-family residential homes plus the 8 ADUs. Direction to increase the minimum lot size from 4,500 square feet to 5,000 square feet, which we've done and cleaned up in all the documents to be consistent. Require that the future development not include natural gas utilities, as you've heard. Encourage a diversity of architectural styles to add additional neighborhood character. clarify affordable housing requirements in the RFP, and then require developers to include a community outreach and engagement plan in the response to the RFP. And all those responses have been incorporated into the documents you have before you tonight. Then the Planning Commission heard this on June 27th and had quite a bit of discussion about it, and these were their kind of feedback to the council. They did recommend unanimously approving. They approved the master development plan on the documents, but they had some comments they wanted incorporated, which we've done, which is to require defensible fire-resistant landscaping, clarify that all existing utilities will be maintained to existing residents during construction, and existing gas service may be maintained permanently to existing residents. Ensure the size of the new homes are compatible to adjacent homes and the existing neighborhood. So not to have a really, kind of giant home right next to a really small one, but to have some compatibility to kind of think almost like a design guideline of trying to be aware of what you're building next to existing neighborhoods and to other buildings, other new homes. And then articulate clear creek riparian area setbacks consistent with the Alameda County Flood Control District's watercourse regulations, which we are fine with to the extent they're feasible. You will hear, I think, from some comments, if we can meet these, we went back and talked to Public Works Department. There are concerns that just because of the slope and other aspects of the site, we may not be able to meet these setbacks. But we will strive to meet them where we can and where it's feasible, but that Public Works needs to review the engineering of that and just can't commit to 100% doing that up front. So I just want to be transparent about that. But we did require that where feasible that they have to comply with these requirements. And then really a lot of conversation about that Carlos B intersection, and we have had traffic engineers look at it and do some preliminary analysis, but just a lot of questions from the planning board and the community about making sure there's more engineering and safety kind of review of that, and we absolutely agree. And so we've made that a requirement of the developer to have to do and conduct some additional traffic circulation, which they will have to do as part of their designs and their tentative map and thing, but really looking at that intersection of Carlos B with extension to Carlos B. So we've made that a very explicit requirement. The other thing that they asked, which we didn't have here up on the slides, is that there was a lot of conversation about the affordable housing requirements, and really honestly they couldn't agree on their direction. So we kind of said, we're going to just present to the council that you don't agree, and that we just want to share to the council some of their concerns. Some of them felt like it should be a much more stricter, that they were okay with the requirement. They really wanted the on-site units, so they were supportive of that. I think that was pretty unanimous. But some of them said we really just need to make that really specific. Others were like, maybe there's some better options out there. In some ways, I think what we've presented here provides the opportunity for that, but we wanted to kind of present that dilemma to you, and so just for something for you to consider as you're deliberating as part of the next. Once I'm done talking. And then the next slide. So I think you'll probably hear some of the outstanding things we've heard and some of the correspondence, and is just this real concern about reducing the 20,000 square foot minimum lot size to a quarter acre, which would be the 10,000, so from half acre to quarter acre, and then the lot coverage ratio. So those we think are still, you may hear from some of the neighbors tonight about those outstanding requests. And I think our response really is that the reason, we just want you to hear from us as to why we're suggesting that. We do think we do support the idea of maintaining that rural character, having single homes, being compatible with existing neighborhood, but given the housing crisis that we're in, wanting and needing really to densify, and I think this is one of the comments from the CDC, that really all neighborhoods being asked to densify. And what this allows you to do, having 5,000 to 20,000, really allows you to have a diversity of units that will have different size homes. It'll mean you'll have homes that will be affordable to different populations, and then also it allows a developer to sell those units at different times. So it may mean that they're able to sell the units faster and then ultimately possibly pay more money for the land. So there's all these benefits, and be able to have a more feasible project. We're concerned with reducing the 40% lot coverage to 30%, especially on the smaller lots, because then you start to have kind of smaller units and it may not make sense. And I think in talking to the planning department, really concerned about taking away some of that flexibility, especially for some of those smaller lots. So I think, ultimately we believe this is a good compromise. You'll hear, I'm sure, comments too about needing to densify even more or provide even more units, and the neighborhood really wants even less units, less impact, and we think what we're proposing here is a compromise to that and kind of tries to balance both of those voices that we've heard. So I think that's it. The next steps are really, if you're approved tonight, we will right away issue this. We have a list of developers that we'll be marketing to. We'll probably be doing some advertisements even to the development community to really try to cast a wide net. Proposal is due at the end of August. We'll have 2 pre-bid meetings with developers so they can come in and ask questions, and then ultimately review the proposals and hope to be back to you by the end of the year with a preferred developer for the site, and then try to negotiate in 9 months a development agreement to sell the land. That's it.
That's all? Yeah, that's a lot of stuff, and we do have a couple of questions, I think, from council members. Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you. I will try to be fast because I have to use the restroom. Sorry. I'm drinking too much water. So if I start bouncing, that's why. So first I want to disclose that I did attend the tour that I think all of us attended as council members last August. And then a couple weeks ago, Mary Ann Higgins invited me to her neighborhood as well. So just wanted to disclose that. But my first question is, following up on the Planning Commissioner's discussion, I did have a chance to watch that meeting. And there are concerns in terms of there's a lot of pressure, the housing crisis, confronting the issue of affordability. So my first question to staff, if you could just give the public an overview of where we are at with tackling the affordability crisis for rentals as well as moderate ownership, with the future parcels that are going to be coming back to us. We haven't had very many public discussions about those, but if you could just please give an overview of where we stand with that. It's not specific to this project, but just what's in the pipeline.
Yeah, and I think, so in general, I'll start with the 238 parcels, but a number of those parcels, it's something that we're looking at for all of the, and this is something the state's looking at as well, as public land, you have the ability to add more requirements to your land, and so we've taken that to heart in terms of all of the other parcels that we're looking at. So for instance, some of the parcels, like parcel 3, is being under consideration for exclusively very low and low income housing, restricted, housing, so 100% of those units. And that all of these developments, as you see even here, being required to do on-site affordable housing, where our ordinance doesn't require that of all developments. So we're really trying to go the extra mile on the 238 parcels to push the affordable housing as part of all these projects. And based on our current estimates, which doesn't even take into consideration parcel 8 or some of the parcels, we think we're at around a 17% overall production of affordable housing of total units, and our ordinance is at 7 to 10%. So almost double what our current ordinance requires of other private developments. So I think it demonstrating that we're really trying to prioritize affordable housing.
Thank you for that. I guess one feedback I have is I was able to review, the CSC was shared a report, I believe, back in February, the Community Services Commission, with regard to where we are at with our RENA numbers, and we're low in certain areas. So one request I do have is on this project, as well as moving forward, if we can capture in the staff report what our current number is, how is this going to help meet the demand, just so it remains, we're holding ourselves accountable, and it's very open and for everyone to acknowledge. And I think what I heard from the planning commissioners, it seems like they almost kind of want like a work session, like this is just very complex stuff and we need more information. So I'll table like how we get to that later, because it doesn't really have to do with this project, but clearly housing is a focus and there needs to be more of a shared vision that needs to be discussed. Maybe it's a joint work session with the Planning Commission, but I think we're at that point where we need to pause and do that. So specific to this RFP and the ADU request, if you could pull up the slide that John had in his presentation, and it said that the preferred option was the ADUs. I would actually want to change that to the preferred option being number 2 and see what creative options the developer will come up to exceed the threshold.
I'm sorry, Mayor, just because this is a public hearing, I just want to make sure from a process perspective, we're doing questions.
Yeah, sorry, that's true.
Yeah, and not comments and then
Questions
let
here.
just public comment. And
Okay.
just from if we're doing questions
Okay.
first, then hearing because it is a public hearing.
So I guess my question is, we could still modify that?
Absolutely.
Tonight. Okay. And then can you answer, the Planning Commission was also concerned about traffic and the Carlos B. Can you elaborate? Now there is a requirement for the developer to do this analysis.
That's correct. It's
Okay.
explicit. I think they would have to do that as part of a tentative map or building that new street. We would require a pretty rigorous engineering analysis and evaluation of that. But we made it very explicit in the RFP that would be absolutely required, is that they'd have to do additional engineering and safety analysis for that street punching into Carlos B. And like I said, we didn't just make that up. I mean, we did have engineers look at it, but at a very conceptual level. So we will absolutely require developers to do more detailed analysis.
And then the RFP, will it come back with, obviously staff is going to vet the different options that are submitted from different developers, but I just want to be clear that there will be variety, right? They basically have flexibility on how they're going to meet the demand of developing this neighborhood, correct? We're not being so strict that it has to be set this one certain way. I just want to get at, like you mentioned earlier, that there could be smaller units specifically on Bunker Hill Court. There will be that flexibility.
Yeah, there's flexibility for them to develop a site plan. And we had to develop something in order to make sure we thought it would fit and that we could come up with a number that was feasible. But they will have the flexibility to develop a site plan. It may be that given some of the topography, they can't fit 74 units and they end up having to do less. We don't know yet. They'll be doing that additional analysis. But I will say is that we are not allowing them to come in and do a zoning amendment other than it has to be an average of 10,000 square foot lots. So that is a requirement in here. So we're not providing flexibility on that. So I just want to make, and that's really, we feel like in some ways the compromise that we're trying to be really transparent about with the community. And so they couldn't, based on the RFP, we would not allow them to come in with a zoning amendment for the land for, an average of 5,000 square foot lots. It would have to be an average of 10,000. Now, how they do that, they could do that in a lot of different ways. But for every 5,000 square foot lot, they have to have one that's 15,000. And if they do 20,000, then they've got to have one that's 7,500. And so there are a lot of different ways to do that, but it's still an average of 10,000 square feet.
Okay, and then we are requesting the transportation plan to see their creativity in terms of shuttle service, what other options might be available. Okay.
Yeah, I tempered the planning commissions. These are single family homes that are going to have cars. So one of the ways you achieve alternative modes is to have higher density and smaller units. So I think we have to be realistic that we're not going to have the most progressive transportation demand management plan in the world, but I think asking each of these developments to think about it and start developing plans, it starts to train the developers, it starts to train all of us to start to make those trade-offs. And so we think it's important to include, but I just want to temper expectations about how much they're really going to be able to reduce their traffic.
And then my last question is staff capacity. Do we have capacity to process application, permits? We're ready and prepared?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendel.
Thank you, Mayor. So a couple questions. First, Bruce, are you planning to come up and speak? So after Mr. King speaks, he had some really good suggestions about the creeks and I'd like staff to be prepared to react or respond to that. But I want to give you a chance to make your case first. And then on the transportation side, your points about the TDM are very well taken. I've been having that same thought. We're not likely to get anything earth-shattering out of it. But I've been wondering, and I've heard some suggestions from folks in the community about different ways to configure the roads that might help. And I completely agree that we have to have some sort of access, other than the existing roads to get out of Bunker Hill. And Carlos B seems like the obvious and logical place to do that. But, there was a suggestion that, what if we turned Bunker Hill into a court and didn't connect it? What if we had Bunker Hill connecting down to Harder and closed off Westview to make it a court? Because, and so I don't know if those are practical. I don't know if they're better than the Carlos B option, but I want to throw them out there for you to respond. And has staff considered them? And is there an opening in this process to look at those possibilities more seriously?
So we did look pretty carefully at that because this was one of the key issues. And so we did have a civil engineer look carefully at whether or not you could go out to harder. The topography is very steep there. And the answer was no. But I mean, it doesn't hurt as we go through the tentative map process. We can ask the developer to take another look at it. Maybe their civil engineer has another idea. So we can ask them to look at it. We did very explicitly say, is there a way to have this go straight out to harder? And if you stand up, which I did, you can stand up there. It's like a really steep.
It's really steep, yes.
And so I don't think it's realistic, but we can ask the developer to look at it again. Then we did ask the fire chief about a fire gate so that we could close. If we opened up Carlos B, could we close off? And he was not comfortable given the hillside and the wild, just where that location is closing that off, even with a fire gate.
Okay. And I guess perhaps I just hope that the RFP that we're considering putting out there doesn't implicitly or explicitly close off those discussions. I guess is my question, and something for staff to think about going forward. And I'll save the rest of my comments for later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lamnon?
Thank you. Yes, I also toured the area a number of times, and thank you to the neighbors who were accessible about that as well. So when this was originally zoned or considered in the housing element, did you mention moderate income homes as the original consideration? And if yes, no?
No, I think it wasn't moderately like deed restricted homes. It was just 80 homes that would be, I think, essentially by design affordable to moderate income people. But it wasn't planned as moderate income.
Yeah, no, I got that impression as well. But what I'm wondering about is, it seems to me, given the topography, the $6 million worth of road access that we are hoping somebody will do, et cetera, is that a reasonable expectation to have the majority of the homes be a moderate to low income to get them built?
Yeah, I mean, we're not putting any requirements that the single family homes have to be restricted in any way in terms of price. So we do expect, on average, units to be 3,500 square feet, and so some of these they're not going to be necessarily affordable to the 80 to 120% area median income.
And I just also want to remind the council that not only do the developers, they have an anticipation to obviously, hopefully make a profit, we also have a minimum purchase price we have to pay to Caltrans. And so, sort of that may also present some challenges if there are restrictions on more affordable units in terms of being able to meet that minimum Caltrans purchase price.
It's a helpful reminder. Thank you. And then I appreciate the push towards all electric. What I'm wondering is, has there been discussion yet with staff around emergency response? So what we're saying is that for a complex that's all electric, if the power goes out, everything goes out. And this is a rural, on a hillside, wildlife interface. And I'm just wondering, have we had those discussions in our emergency planning about the balance?
Not yet. No.
Okay. And then given that this is public land, is there a PLA requirement? Do we need to put some language in the RFP if it goes forward about an approach to working with labor? What are the thoughts there?
Again, I think the council had a policy discussion about that early on and decided not to put those requirements in the RFP, again, due to the minimum purchase price with Caltrans. What has resulted, I think, with the William Lyon project that was independently negotiated as part of the deal. And, while on these are private development projects, these are not city projects, and we do have the citywide PLA on public projects. So the council I wanted to remind the council on that policy discussion that was had early on.
I appreciate that reminder. I just, wanted to kind of check in about that, as well as to
one
consider.
More thing to add, that any public roads or any public utilities will be subject to prevailing wage. So you will have that. It's just a little different. I just want to be clear that on those public improvements, prevailing wage will be part of that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then lastly, on the left turn into Carlos B, or the turn, if Carlos B, sorry, let me say that differently. If Carlos B connects, was there consideration of, it seems like the signalized intersection would be at Tanglewood, not at Overlook.
You wouldn't have a signal there. We looked at it. The traffic engineer does not think you need a signal at Carlos B where Bunker Hill would punch through. You would we are talking about it as part of Parcel 6, a new intersection, not at Overlook, but a little bit farther up on a new road that would come through the PG&E easement area. So where you come up, it starts to flatten on Carlos B. You'd have a new signalized intersection there. That would be required as part of the Parcel 6 development, but this development does not require a signalized intersection.
Would it require a left turn lane coming down the hill into the complex?
A left turn lane coming down the hill
So if Carlos B is open
from Parcel 5, so you turn left onto Carlos B. You mean?
No, from Carlos B. So
coming down. Got
coming
it.
down the hill.
So we'll be looking at all those, whether or not you're going to need the left turn pockets there. Yeah, but we've done some preliminary analysis on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wahab.
Thank you. This question is actually for our city manager. I know previously we talked about different types of homes, and you've stated even just in this meeting that the townhomes are the most bang for a buck, if you will. One, can we ask how much is this entire parcel costing the city?
Costing the city? You
I
mean,
think the minimum purchase price with Caltrans.
Yes.
We'll get that number.
Okay. And then technically, we still do not own any of these parcels, correct?
We own them. We don't have to pay for them until we close escrow with the developer. So
Okay.
technically, we have title to the properties and are
Okay.
maintaining them.
And how many acres is this plot of land?
It's approximately 37 acres.
37 acres. And we had previous tenants on this land that have been removed, if you will, or, nicer word for that. But how many tenants were there?
There were 24.
24 tenants. And what happened to those tenants?
They participated in the city's tenant transfer program, which provided them additional cash stipends as well as access to a tenant transfer agent to help them identify new housing opportunities.
Okay. And on this current 37 acres of land, how much or what percentage, even ballpark, is currently developed in housing?
what percentage of the site?
Yes, of the 37 acres that we...
I mean, it depends on how, if you look at the, you mean in terms of building coverage?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard, I can't tell you, but there's whether or not the lots, because the lots are larger than the actual building coverage, but if you look at, I think if you go to the land use...
Currently,
Are you talking
how
about
much
how many
land are we-
structures are left? We've started demolishing a number of them, so how many?
the existing
Yeah, how many
structures?
structures?
Yeah,
are left?
everything right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the plan.
There were the 24 tenancies, and then there was, it's roughly 34 in the mid 30 range.
Okay. And in regards to, sorry, and I apologize, I wrote the note, but I'm just double checking. The 2040 plan, when was it last updated?
The general plan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
The new general plan was adopted, I believe, in 2015.
Yeah.
Or 20. Or late, it
2014.
was early 2016. It was right before I became city manager.
Okay. And in regards to the current tenants or anything like that, were we able to potentially give them first right of refusal?
It's something we've talked about. We have conversations with Eden Housing on some of our other sites about allowing some of the tenants that are being transferred from some of these other properties to have a first right in other affordable housing projects. And so we are exploring that and looking at ways to try to make sure that if they're income eligible, because a number of the tenants that were on the Bunker Hill probably weren't low income. But if they are, then they're income eligible, then trying to see if we could find a unit for them in some of the other affordable housing projects that we're planning in the city. And so we have explored that in a number of cases.
Good. The homes that we want to build, what is projected to be the average cost of these homes?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay. Do we know how much we charge just in general per square foot?
Well, that would be set by the developer, and so we don't build houses, so we don't have a cost per square foot. So it would be,
we don't have the cost of the average cost per in Hayward.
It depends by construction type. I mean, that's a really hard thing to estimate.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, we have exhausted, you'll be happy to hear, all of you who have been waiting to speak, we have exhausted council questions, and I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing on this item. Oh, sorry, I don't. Is your thing not? Okay. Council members Armenio.
Can you, thank you, Mayor. Can you put up the site map, please? I have two questions. And one is kind of a follow-up with colleague Mendel's question. All right, so we are planning an entryway through Carlos B., correct?
Correct.
All right, and I think, can the RFP, I just want to make sure that this is possible, can the RFP also request the developers to explore all possibilities into another entry into this project? I really would not, if I were to live in this area, I wouldn't want 200 new cars driving through my street at one time. So there is that corner, what is it, way at the bottom, the one that's supposed to be too steep. There must be some energy engineer out there who can figure out something. I don't know.
That's what I asked them as well.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think let's put it in there and let's see what they can come up. We certainly aren't going to foreclose that opportunity. I just want to temper expectations because we did ask our civil engineer to explicitly look at that and tell, and it was very difficult. But I think we should put it in there in the RFP and ask the developers as part to explore it.
Okay. And can you have another conversation with our fire chief? The map, please. If there is a fire below the new development, then the fire engine can come in through Harder Road. And if there's a fire in the new development, the fire engine can come in through Carlos B. Would that alleviate the concern that our fire department has about not being able to maneuver if there was a gate preventing the new owners driving through the old neighborhood? Is that something that we can check with the fire chief again?
To put a fire gate there? You mean?
Yes, if fire gate at that little corner with, I can't remember the name of the street. Central Court.
Right. So we did ask him. I mean, we can ask again.
Yes.
I think his concern was given the location and the wildlife fire risks and other things to not have any impediment. He wants 2 points of access and not have any impediment to be able to get his trucks up there. But we'll ask again, I think.
Right. Yeah. And then ask him if there's an entry into the older neighborhood and then a different entry into the new neighborhood. That's my question. And my other question is the infrastructure improvements. They're for the older neighborhood, correct?
No, it'll be all new utilities just for the existing units, except there are, I think, 5 existing homeowners that have own parcels in that Bunker Hill Parcel 5 area.
In the new area.
And so we'd work with them, we'd make sure that any utility, they didn't have any interruption to their existing utilities, and that, we'd allow them to hook into the new infrastructure, which we'd hope they'd want to do, but we'll work that out with them. But they certainly will not have any interruption to their utilities.
So the older neighborhood keeps its rural setting of sorts with no sidewalks, etc.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So are there any other council members who have any questions here? No. Thank you. Thank you. Get a prize for that. No, it's good to ask the questions. I'm not posing questions. But now we're going to open the public hearing on this item. And again, so first card I have is from Matt Hodel and and Colleen is after. She can say her last name. She'll follow him.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. I moved into the neighborhood in October of last year. From Menlo Park, I chose Hayward, and it was because of the neighborhood. It was because of the rural setting. It was because of the ease to downtown. It was not to live next to 80 other homes or 100 other homes or 150 other homes. Based on recent studies, based on 74 new homes, you will add 193 new cars to our neighborhood. We have 2 points of access right now through Central and Westview. Unless that road gets built on Carlos B., which is not confirmed, that means we have over 400 cars going through those 2 intersections. My ask of you is to make sure that this does not get any bigger. I understand that you guys do need to sell this land. I appreciate the need for you guys to do that. But I do ask that you do not make it any bigger. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Kagaranan. Okay, I'm learning.
Hi, I'm Colleen Kagaranan. I've spoken with several of you. I'm coming here today feeling rather discouraged. I don't feel or see that our voices have been influencing this process very much. I do want Bunker Hill to be developed. I'm not anti-development. And I understand that rezoning would allow for flexibility for the developer. But I think jumping from a minimum of 20,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet is a huge change. And I ask that we don't do that. I'm asking that the average lot size maybe be around 15,000. I think that's a good compromise. They came to us with a number of 10,000, so it starts at 20. 15 would be a great compromise. I think we could do that as a compromise. Keep the average lot coverage at a maximum of 30. Saying that you could go from 30 to 40, there's nothing stopping them from doing 40 all over the place. It's kind of saying minimum 30, maximum 40. Anyway, I'd like to see it stay at 30. I love the rural country feel up there. According to the general plan, hillside streets don't have sidewalks, don't have curbs. There are things in the general plan itself that maintain that rural feeling in our hillside, and I'd like to stick with that. People keep talking about the new neighborhood versus the old neighborhood. This whole thing is our neighborhood. The houses have come down, but that was our neighborhood, and it is being divided into 2. But I guess that's the point I want to make. The whole thing is our neighborhood. You're coming into our neighborhood and building in our neighborhood, and I'd like you guys to be aware of that. Okay, so then I would love to see that the development be contingent upon access to Carlos B. I'm scared that this could go through without access to Carlos B. and have all that traffic on my street, and I have a 3-year-old, and we get to walk over to Matt's house because he has a 3-year-old, and it's great, and I love being able to walk on the rural streets. So I also would love to see a fire gate at Carlos, at the intersection of Central Boulevard and Bunker Hill. So those are my requests. And that's how I'm feeling today. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Chris Karangan. I had it, darn it.
Hello. So I'd like to thank John and Jennifer for letting us be a part of this process, but there are obviously things we don't see eye to eye on. And I apologize for the tone of this, but I wrote it when I was emotional. But here you go. Like many of my neighbors, I attended the Planning Commission meeting regarding Parcel 5 development. It was noted that we were the largest audience that the Commission had seen in years. At first, it seemed like they understood our concerns and also echoed some of them like you, and they also visited our neighborhood. But they ultimately and unanimously rubber-stamped this plan, even after voicing their own concerns. My neighbors and I felt defeated and felt like we've been wasting all our time and energy, emotion, and effort towards this process. I've heard it said that we are lucky to be given a voice in this process and that other cities don't give their residents this chance. I agree and thank the city for giving us the opportunity to be heard, but what is the point of giving us a voice if you're not going to listen to us? As part of the community most directly impacted by this project and the community that will have to live with the impact of your decisions for years to come, I just want to say that we support the development of the Bunker Hill neighborhood. We want it to be developed. We support affordable housing. We do not support the current number of proposed housing units, and we do not support high-density housing. The topography of this parcel is not an ideal location for high-density housing. Earthquakes, landslides, and I know you'll hear from groups who want high-density housing. That's why I'm just saying that. The current zoning is for low density, which is about 37 houses. The current proposal as it stands is going to double that. We do not support the impact of the current number of proposed housing units on traffic. We have yet to feel the traffic impact of the homes and development currently being built on Mission, like the Residence Inn and those townhouses. And we have yet to feel that the high-density development that's planned for Parcel 6, which is going to add further traffic into that corridor, into Carlos B and Mission. We support the need to require the development of Bunker Hill to be contingent upon building a primary access route from Carlos B or Harder Road. We understand the economics. We know that the city wants to recoup their costs and make a profit from their agreement with Caltrans. We understand the time constraint, but please do not put profit over people. I thought that we as a community could make a difference in this process. It seems to me that the Planning Commission members had their own agendas and had their minds made up to vote for this plan regardless of what we had to say. I also suspect that you yourselves have your own agendas and have already made up your minds.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Thank you. Donna Fitzgerald, and she'll be followed by Eric Morkby.
Hello, my name is Donna Fitzgerald. I live on Westview Way since 1999. I would like to thank you all for listening to our concerns, the Honorable Mayor, City Council, City Managers, and also for Jennifer and her staff assistant for actually listening to our concerns. However, I agree also with my neighbors that I feel that our concerns...
Would you want to pull the mic down a little? Yeah, thanks.
Okay. I also agree with my neighbors regarding their concerns regarding our neighborhood, regarding traffic, also the density, the topography, the wildlife, and so please take all of that into consideration. I am in support of developing Parcel 5. However, it is a unique parcel, and you have other parcels that you can look at for regarding the higher density instead of our neighborhood. So thank you. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Eric Markby, followed by Kevin Ng.
Mayor, Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak right here. The Planning Commission, almost exclusively, all of their questions were about the traffic patterns in our area. We struggle on Central and Westview. For those of you that have gone up there, you know that. I work for a public works in another city, and I drive 30 to 40-foot rigs on a regular basis. I would struggle getting around at least one road and not be able to get up the other side. The only thing that can get around through Westview right now is one of the shorter fire trucks. They struggle only because we got portions of some of the curbs there red zoned. That's the only reason they're able to get through there. If we do not think about the process that we're getting ready to go through, this development's going through, we all know this, but right now you're getting ready to put all of that construction truck traffic on my street. There are areas of Central that right now struggle with crew cab pickup trucks trying to go around corners because the cars are so tight up there, you can't drive through there. Now, start including all of the dump trucks, all of the work trucks, all of the other flatbed trucks, all of the big rigs that are getting to go through there. We are not looking at the process that it's going to take to get things up there. There have to be multiple points of egress, entrance, exits to that area. Bare minimum, it has to be for the construction. We're not thinking about that process. The construction aspect of that, we have all roads with no sidewalks. We have skinny roads. We have people that walk these roads. We have areas that are difficult to get through. I would struggle getting my equipment up there. At the very minimum, we're going to have to start asking people to start moving their vehicles just to be able to start the construction. Give me an excavator, put me on that corner, I'll get you an egress in a weekend. Thank you.
All right. Did you leave your phone number on your card? Okay. Kevin Ng, followed by Peggy Guernsey.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everybody. And I have just a couple questions. And I live in 25673 Mainland Drive for 23 years. Deer born in my backyard. Turkey come in the morning. So it's even July 4, they're hiding out on the area. Yeah. So consider save the wildlife by using, I'm going to show you some old maps. Too big. See, just for instance, this area, if everybody fenced up, then there's no wildlife. If it's possible, open them all up. Okay. Okay. It's just make sure they are not blocking them up. I know how many square foot, 5,000, 7,000, depend on how you calculate. Then you have more area for the wildlife. Oh, thank you. I didn't know that. Okay. Good. All right. This is the old map. Okay. If you can open up all, then the wildlife can go through. Okay. Another thing is, the second question is on Central. When you say the road's too steep, when people stand up, I see you very tall. But when I see you on this corner, you're much more shorter because this area is open. See the map opens? This is the steep hill. This is the steep hill. Then when you stand up here, yes, of course, it's very steep, but you can excavate it down before the house was built. When the house was built, there's no way you can move them. Once when you excavate it down, it becomes a slope, very soft slope. It's even softer than when I got home from Central to Mainland on the south side. Central to Mainland is a lot more steeper, but they still can do. Why can't we do this? It's more safety for people who live there. If you're going to spend $1 million house, I bet you probably will buy $1 million house, but there's no access. Okay? There's no access going out. Everybody going through Westview. Westview also people want to go home too. Want to get out. But what can we do? So think of that way. Okay? That's all I can say. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy Guernsey, followed by Mary Ann Higgs.
Okay. Bear with us. Oops. This is part of the mudslide that happened after they built Cal State's football field. This is up at the top of the picture is Central Boulevard, and this is Delmar Avenue, where I currently live and have for over almost 50 years. The current yard I had, the mud was clear up halfway almost to my front door. I didn't live there. These are pictures that were taken by another resident. I don't completely support the plans that are being developed here. I was also not asked, but apparently Mayor Halliday and Councilman Mendel, you arranged for the people on Westview to get together and invite people from their street and their neighborhood into their home. Nobody on Delmar Avenue, which is down below all this, was ever invited. And I don't think that's fair or right when you look at what's going on and what happened on this hill and all this mud. These cars never came home until 3 or 4 days after the mudslide. They had to park out on Mission Boulevard, and the city of Hayward did not come and help these people dig out. This is the current block of Berry and Delmar, where now you've put in some nice curb breaks, and I appreciate that work being done. The work that was done by your traffic people was really fantastic. They came and talked and they listened and they looked, and now they have to send 2 guys back to drill out holes that they forgot, where, like on Mrs. Rich's property, there were little drains built from our homes. There are endangered species there that are not spoken about in this report. They're the whip snake, the burrowing owl, and the red-legged tree frog. There's a natural asbestos field on the entire front of that hill. In front of my house on Delmar, every house on that street has room for 2 cars to park on the street. And I have my car, I have a 1-car garage, but other homes don't. So you're asking that they only put in 1 car to park up on the street? These are not affordable housing units. They are going to be multi-million-dollar houses. You are building a tiny stone gray parking lot up on that hill. And the residents on Westview, they don't want it down their street. But what about coming down Central? I've been told for years that the lots directly behind my house, there cannot be sidewalks, and if we do the sidewalks on the upper end, east end of the hill, we dig into somebody else's lot and we go into homeowners that, they can't, they've been told for years, they can never build on those lots.
Thank you.
The city also does not have copies of these. They're welcome to make sense of them. I've offered them for 35 years and nobody has ever said, yeah, we want them. So if staff wants them, they're welcome.
All right, we'll contact you. Mary Ann Higgs, she'll be followed by Debbie Frederick.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Higgs. You all know that. And before I go to my script here, I just really want to commend all the people that showed up to speak on this tonight. I'm really impressed by the thoughtful comments that I'm hearing, and I know they're my neighbors, but listening to their passion and the specific areas, that they're interested in, I'm just so proud to be part of this neighborhood. And even the people who are going to speak with an opposing view, I'm glad they showed up too, because that's what makes our democratic process work. So, all that being said, throughout this process, my objective has remained the same. My objective has been to work with the city to find a way to develop Parcel 5 in a way that benefits the city as a whole while minimizing negative impacts to the existing neighborhood and maintaining the rural character of that neighborhood. I've tried really hard to be objective, and I've worked hard to consider the perspectives of different individuals and groups. I've engaged a number of people to enhance my knowledge on this topic. These people include, but are not limited to, members of the existing neighborhood, citizens who live in other parts of Hayward who have shown interest in how former 238 corridor parcels are developed, realtors, so I can better understand the existing Hayward housing market and what would enhance that market, an expert who has consulted on multiple land development projects in Hayward, Union City, and Fremont, city staff, and I've had the privilege of having individual meetings with 6 of the 7 of you. And when I've met with you, you can all attest to the fact that in addition to sharing my views, I've asked for your opinion on this project as well. I've tried really hard to be fair. In addition to those meetings, I've considered a number of other information sources, including the current zoning for Parcel 5, the characteristic of the existing neighborhood, and the potential impacts to that neighborhood that will result from the development of the parcel. I've read the Hayward 2040 General Plan with specific attention to the hillside design guidelines. I reviewed the 1992 recommendations of the Mission Foothill Task Force. I've attended city and county community meetings where the topic was related to addressing the housing crisis in the Bay Area. I've factored in projected housing needs in the area and looked at the housing projects that have been approved, some of which are currently under construction in the city of Hayward. And as part of those current projects, how much of it is being deemed for affordable housing versus market housing. So the point being, I've done a lot of research on this. I didn't sit in my living room and say, this is what I want, and left it at that. So turning now to the staff's recommendation, I agree that single-family homes are the best choice and the best use of this land. While I would prefer fewer houses, I can accept a maximum of 74 single-family homes. However, I would like the maximum lot coverage to remain at 30% because I think this is what will help us to maintain the rural feeling of the neighborhood. Even at 30% coverage, if the minimum lot size stays at 5,000, that's a 1,500 square foot footprint. This is likely going to be a 2-story house, which is a more than 2,000 square foot house, which would make a nice home, a nice starter home for somebody. I'm out of time, so I won't read the rest of my stuff. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting all of us to come up there and really be able to eyeball the whole layout with somebody who knows it well. Debbie Frederick, followed by Thomas Burt.
Thank you for this opportunity, and I really want to ask sort of a minor point of order right now for an extra 1 minute, because I want to, as a 24-year Caltrans tenant, I would like to, for just 1 minute, address to you and the city, in defense of our city government and our city staff, the letter that you received from that housing collective. And I think my perspective as a 24-year, I moved in as a tenant in 1989, and I really need brief comment on this separate from the project. Is that okay, please?
Just try to get it through it as fast as you can. I'll give you a little bit more time.
The Caltrans tenants were given multiple opportunities to buy their homes. This letter from the housing collective has multiple inaccuracies, and I am available if any of you want the housing collective. The neighborhood had a lawyer representing the tenants. We had neighborhood meetings. The city had workshops on how to become first-time home buyers. The tenants, all of us, at varying levels, received stipends that we could have put towards first down payments. Briefly, there are multiple inaccuracies in that letter. Okay, going on to the issues of the project. Again, you know, I live on Bunker Hill Boulevard. I was able to buy my home 6 years ago. I look forward to staying with my new neighbors. I do take that perspective. I want to comment on the density, the riparian nature of the area. I agree with Marianne that the density needs to remain 30%, and it actually will allow, with varying lot sizes, for all of those homes to not be 35 square foot homes, and to have some homes being smaller homes, and allow the neighborhood to still see blue sky and greenery between the homes. I'm sorry, it's just you're important, and this is important. My biggest issue is the safety of the consideration of punching it through as a primary access to Carlos B. Boulevard. Even though the staff has commented about requiring extra review and research, they have presented it as the primary traffic access. Please go stand at the edge of Bunker Hill Boulevard. They're not going to have a signal light. I'm surprised they're going to have a signal light down the way. There are other alternatives. the families and myself to think of, we're mostly going to need to get down Mission Boulevard, to Carlos B to Mission Boulevard. The traffic comes up too fast. To sit in the middle of a lane, in the middle of all that Ford traffic, it's not safe. I want to describe, as I did to the Planning Commission, there are two options. It's not just punching harder, potentially through at the end of Central, but right in this cubby hole of Maitland, which is near where they have the trail going through, there is a gentle valley. Maitland is already so wide that it allows two-way traffic and parking as is. If you go north on Maitland to Central, there was Caltrans property there, and all the way to the Hillside Alliance Church, there is an empty hillside next to Central.
Okay, I gotta ask you to stop, but I would urge you to share this with staff as well, and we've heard you. I think we're going to be talking about the road and the circulation. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Burt, followed by Bruce King.
Good evening, all. I'm going to put this down. Everybody's seen this. We have very intelligent people in this room who work very hard at this whole project. So, and I think Mary Ann summed it up pretty well. We've got a good neighborhood, and thank you for those who came to visit. I've seen you all now a few times. By the way, Kelly, thank you for getting our grass cut this year. That was really great. But we really love being a part of Hayward. My neighbors, thank you. I don't have much to say at this point because they were summarizing it. Specifically, I feel privileged in my life. It's been a cool life. I lived in one of the most highly populated, densely lived in places in the world. It's called Hong Kong. Also, I don't like earthquakes, so there's all these different things that the experts are looking at. I would just ask specifically, 7,000-foot lot sizes, 30% coverage. Let the experts go at it. I think of that commercial where you're in front of State Farm and they're giving you the rebates going back, and then some guy shows up with a fishing line and says, here's $1, here's $1. So I think Chris really summarized it well. Though we're being heard, I don't know how well we're really being listened to. I think all of us are pretty socially minded in that neighborhood. There's realities that we're all facing. It's a tough time in society dealing with low income and housing issues. Once again, my neighbors, I want to say colleagues, but they're neighbors, I think voiced their concerns. I share them. So my specific point tonight is 7,000-foot lot sizes and minimum 30% cover. Oh, excuse me, I'm saying it the other way. What about, you know what I'm saying, but I'll be specific. 7,000-foot lot size minimum and 30% maximum coverage on the lots. And I think the math will work out, and I'll trust the rest of it to work, because obviously there's a lot of other work to go. Al, you made a good comment. There's several more times we're going to be able to play a role here. It's just the direction we're setting now. We all know it's going to impact as it goes down. So I'd really ask everyone here, and also there's other people here that are really, I knew a lot of the people that left the area, and they were very nice people, and they were compensated for their changes. So I would just ask that we focus on the existing neighborhood, the people that are there. We're all citizens of this good city. Thank you for all you do. Thanks.
Thank you. Bruce King, followed by Lacey Amadai.
Hi, I'm Bruce King with Friends of San Lorenzo Creek. I have a few comments, recommendations regarding the creeks and the trails on this parcel group. The first is the houses that back up to the creek, that the lots should have a setback from the creek, and standard setback in Alameda County would be a 2-to-1 slope plus 20 feet. And but that was presented to the Planning Commission, and they recommended that this project look at that. And I understand there might be some variances depending upon what exactly you have to accomplish, but we want to keep people's backyards and houses out of the creek areas. The second is, for both of these open spaces, we should be establishing who owns them, who's responsible for them, and what's the funding mechanism for maintaining them. Because we don't, and the who owns them doesn't have to be who's responsible for maintaining it, and maybe someone else should be responsible for oversight. So one way to do that is to have a conservation easement and to require an endowment possibly, but that the development leads towards the maintenance of those open spaces. Okay. Then in the last week or so, a couple of us went and climbed down into the creek areas to take a look at what's there. And the creek areas are very dense riparian oak woodlands with buckeyes and laurels. In some areas it's so dense you can't get into it. In other areas you can, if you find a way, you get right under the canopy and you can walk along the creek. It's gorgeous. For the northern area up here, we actually found a dirt road, an old dirt road that goes from Carlos B over to the end of Bunker Hill Court, which would be an excellent way for people to be able to get down into that creek area and see it. If you don't go down there, you can't get into that area at all and see the creek. It's so dense you can't see it from above. And there's actually evidence of a lot of debris from a homeless encampment, so having a trail there would actually be a good way to get eyes on the creek so that you don't have homeless people and you can actually get down there and see things. And then on the other creek area on the southern end, there's, for example, there's a lot of debris in the creek that's probably gotten there by homeowners that have dumped things like tires and things into the creek. And there's actually areas where there's some outbreaks of different types of ivy, but it probably could be mitigated. So I'm recommending that do some debris cleanup and maybe have somebody look at these creek areas and decide what limited restoration you could do, like removal of ivy, which will just proliferate over time. Thank you.
Thank you. Lacey Amadai, followed by Alicia Crater, followed by Alicia Lawrence, and hers is the last card I have. So.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So I wanted to make a comment just to urge you to please adopt changes to the master development plan, and this is in order to adequately reflect the overwhelming need for affordable housing in this community. The proposed plan with 74 single-family homes is out of reach for the vast majority of Hayward residents. And with just 8 affordable units, it seems we are furthering the trend in the city where we have overproduced market rate units while underproducing units at affordable levels. This trend concerns me because continuing to overproduce homes that are out of reach for most Hayward residents while simultaneously underproducing affordable homes is a formula to exacerbate gentrification and displacement. I'm also very concerned about the 24 families that were displaced from this parcel so that this sale and development could take place, and that there is no mention of a no net loss policy to offer these families the right of first refusal for these or other comparable affordable units, although it sounds like that's being looked into. I also wanted to register my concern regarding the lack of information surrounding the affordable units, and I would urge you to amend the plan to include more guidance. First, it's not clear who would be administering these properties and ensuring the enforcement of the affordability levels and income restrictions. It also would be important to know if these are going to be scattered around the sites or if they're going to be spatially segregated in one area. And if that's the case, I think it should be spelled out in the master development plan so that doesn't happen. I just wanted to add that the whole process for planning for the sale of these 238 parcels, in my opinion, has exposed an absence of a citywide policy to address first the use of public lands to serve the community's needs. And I understand that these 8 units with the in lieu fees will satisfy the city's ordinance. But But considering that the city owns these lands currently and has more agency to shape the type of development constructed, it's just worrying to me that we have no other policy in place to ensure that our public lands will be used for the public good, which is probably why it seems that most of these parcels with residential uses are going for market rate. Although I was encouraged to see that parcel 3 and maybe 4 will be dedicated to an affordable housing developer. So just considering possible policies to use as a measuring stick, we could consider the State Surplus Land Act, which requires that cities first offer their surplus land to an affordable housing developer. And if that transaction does not pan out, the land is then restricted at an affordability rate of 15%. And if I'm not mistaken, I understand that that came up with Parcel 1 and that it's the city's position that it does not apply. But more importantly than looking at the state mandate, I'm just wondering why there's not a policy here for us to voluntarily say what we're going to do with our public lands. And why there's not a citywide policy here for, including for Parcel 1, to address the gentrification, displacement risks. There's policies out there that exist that requires, for example, setting aside affordable units when you know you're going to be doing a big development that's going to raise the values of the land, and I'm just seeing a real big absence. So I'd urge you to amend the master development plan to better address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia Crater, followed by Alicia Lawrence.
Sorry. Good evening. As you know, this council has heard time and time again from community members that we are concerned about the housing crisis, we are affected by the housing crisis, and we need you to take action against the housing crisis. The recent passing of the Hayward Rent Ordinance is not enough, but to use this parcel for single-family homes that will not be protected by rent control, and for only 8 of the 74 units to be affordable housing, is just a step backward in the fight against the housing crisis. This land should be used for public good, it should address the crisis at hand, but most of all, it should be affordable. I would hate to see this land be used as an opportunity for more renters to come into this building and tell their stories of displacement caused by rent increases. This proposal does not meet the community needs that have been reiterated endlessly to the council, so please use the opportunity of the Parcel 5 to address community needs and create more affordable housing. Do not do more than the bare minimum, and this is not something to be tabled, but something that needs to be addressed now. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia Lawrence. And if there's anyone else who would like to speak on this item, please bring a card up to our city clerk.
Alicia Lawrence, the Hayward Collective. You're receiving copies of this now. Thank you, Lacey and Alicia, for hitting so many of the points that I was going to make myself. And I just, again, this is public land. It is not land that belongs to the neighbors. I understand that you want to build something that addresses their concerns, but it does not belong to them. It belongs to the entire community. And as such, it needs to meet the needs of the entire community, not just the requests of the neighbors. I appreciate Bruce King's comments. I've seen him speak a number of times, and so I appreciate what he brings into the conversation, and so I make no objections to anything that he has contributed this evening. And I would also contend that the people most directly impacted by what's happening on Parcel 5 are the people who were displaced from Parcel 5. If you are here this evening commenting and you are a neighbor, then you are in a home. You are a homeowner. You have stability. And you have a voice, and you're welcome to use that voice however you choose. But the people who were displaced and who were enticed to leave, one of whom I consoled in the lobby, as she cried about having to leave her home, I would say that those are the people most impacted. And so I have summarized here for you the things that the Hayward Collective believes should be included in the RFP. Most specifically, a one-to-one replacement of the 24 homes that were destroyed, that were naturally affordable to the people who were there, and first right of refusal for the people who were displaced, even if they have made accommodations elsewhere. It's not our place to speak on their behalf about what they might choose if they were offered the opportunity to move back into the neighborhood in which they were living. And additionally, I would be interested to see what the numbers pan out to. Thank you, Councilmember Marquez, about how the
developments that are in the pipeline stack up against the RENA numbers that we are supposed to meet, because currently you're not doing a very good job. And to say that 17% across the parcels is more than enough because our affordable housing ordinance says we only need 7 to 10%, the affordable housing ordinance isn't enough. And the expectation is that 49, almost 50% of housing in Hayward for this current cycle should be very low income to moderate. And you are not hitting those numbers. This is an opportunity with the public land to tell the developers across the city what you expect to see in developments. 8 ADUs, you're just selling this community down the river. Thank you.
Jesus Reynoso.
Buenas noches. Yo, mi punto de vista, he visto que están construyendo muchas casas donde quiera, pero nunca he visto un proyecto de crear un bosque. Voy a platicar algo que me pasó el 4 de julio. El 4 de julio.
I've seen that you have planned to make several houses, but what you have not planned is to preserve the nature of the area.
Estaba yo acostado en el suelo, en el patio de mi casa, cuando hicieron la quemazón de cohetes. Llegó el olor al humo hasta abajo. Es decir, la contaminación está muy alta. En pocos minutos de un área donde no se tronó muchos cohetes, que fue aquí por la B.
I want to tell you something that happened to me on the 4th of July. I was lying down in the patio of my house, and all of a sudden, everything, all of the fireworks and the firecrackers produced a smoke, and it got to the level where I was at, in an area off of B where not many fireworks were set off.
Pienso que las compañías que están haciendo las casas deben de pensar también en hacer un bosque y que sean de árboles nativos, que realmente lo que están plantando muchos árboles no son nativos.
I believe that the developers should consider building some kind of forest or some kind of nature preserve of trees that are native to the area.
Especialmente la flor de California ya no se mira, está perdiéndose. A mí me tocó trabajar en Pittsburgh plantando en los arroyos árboles nativos, porque son los que ocupan poca agua y no es necesario estarla regando todo el año.
Especially the California flower, which is no longer seen. I worked in Pittsburgh where we planted these type of things that were not seen anymore, California flowers. They don't need very much water, they don't need very much care, and they grow alone.
Y también donde los arroyos se plantan, los árboles donde nace el agua, necesitan un poquito más de 30 metros para que el agua penetre a los mantos acuíferos.
Also, where this type of natural flowers being planted, it needs to be about 30 meters away from the water so that they can absorb this moisture and continue to grow.
Y yo creo que sí deben de pensar un poquito más en eso, hacer un bosque, lo que se nombra un pulmón de oxígeno para la ciudad.
I believe you should consider the planting of something natural, which would preserve the oxygen, some kind of a little village, a little plantation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other cards and so if there is anyone who would like to speak, okay. You can.
One more item.
Oh, no, you already spoke, didn't you? Yeah, I can't.
Actually, for the solar system.
I can't do that. I'm sorry. So I'm going to close public comments on this now since there aren't any new speakers, and we'll go to council comments and some action on this item. And I do want to thank everybody for contributing to this very interesting discussion. And I'm sure that we will have some council members who want to weigh in, but right now we don't. So are we ready for a motion here? All right. Okay, great. Councilmember Salinas.
Thank you. Well, I first wanted to thank the neighbors for staying engaged and and inviting us up there to drive around and walk around. this area is, particularly with me, this area, as I told one of the neighbors, I went to Hayward High, and, we used to go, in that area when we used to cut school. We used to go in this area to run through Cal State East Bay, or Cal State Hayward then, of course. And so this area, I had friends that live that have lived in the neighborhood for many years. And so this is, even then, this was a very complicated place. Even when you walked, I don't even know if there was a trail back there, but we used to walk from the football field at Cal State through the neighborhood, and slushing through all the grass and in that whole back area, and it was it was difficult to get back there. Part of the reasons why we were back there, right? So, anyways. But I first, what I first wanted to say is, and particularly for the rest of the city, as they watch us move through this process through the parcels, these parcels are very complicated. They're not easy, square, parcels. We can go from parcel to parcel, and the topography is complicated. The fault runs through all these parcels, and to this day, some of the engineering that is going into these parcels is incredible, and so it's for me going through this process, particularly going back to 2010, 2011. I have certainly learned a lot about these parcels, and it has certainly been a big education for me around engineering. Not necessarily just about housing, which is another whole aspect, but for me, it's around the engineering of these parcels. But so I just wanted to make that note that these are very complicated spaces, and we are working very hard to make sure we accomplish our goals. Second comment I want to make is this is an RFP, right? There's still plenty of time to have input. Nothing is set in stone. No homes are being built tomorrow. We're not given a green light for anything yet. There's still a lot of time. There's still, our developers are going to have to respond to the RFP and come up with plans. Neighbors and the community are going to have input. People are going to like it. People are going to hate it, and it's all going to play out here. So there's still a lot of development process that we're going to go through. So I wanted to make that point. Thirdly, I do agree with keeping it rural. I agree. I think that it's a very interesting space, and thinking about what could potentially go just south of the parcel on the other side of Harder. I think there's some really interesting, harmonious rural relationships that can occur, not only with parks, but with potentially agricultural planning and development and so forth. I know the other side of Harder is just equally, and if not more, complicated. But so I do agree with the neighborhood that I would like to keep it rural and have that rural feel. Mr. King, the wildlife idea, yes, I think there should be something done back there. I know you made a very specific ask, which is the 20-foot variance to the creek, that buffer zone. That would be, that would be nice. I don't want homes right up to the creek, and I know that that's something that we've been talking about up here. Before I go on, I also want to make a point that I hope staff, and I know staff will, direct any developer when they go to not only the RFP, respond to the RFP, but when they go to develop, that they listen to this, right? And they're going to be talking to the neighborhoods, and they're going to be talking to all the stakeholders and so forth. So I'm confident in that. So the wildlife. Now, the traffic, I looked at that side from the harder side. I don't know if there's an engineering, mechanism that can take place to bridge from the end of that street. What is it, Maitland? I guess Central to bridge Central to harder. I don't know. It just seems really complicated. I think the logical, road would be on Carlos B. What that looks like, I think that will, be interesting to see what a developer comes up with. But I think it will get flushed out in the RFP. Now, in terms of size, I want to specifically address size. And, the conversation we had in the economic development, in the CDEC meeting, the goal of that conversation was, or I should say the goal of our recommendations was to create a set, to create this, this area of a low and a high, and enable developers to come up with as much, or to be as creative as possible in this space, right? 5,000 to 20,000 square foot lots with maximum of 40% lot coverage. And so that was, I figured, based on what I was thinking, was that would give us enough flexibility. I know developers are going to listen to us. I know they're going to be listening to the neighbors, but at least it gives everyone enough flexibility to have diversity in size, to have diversity in lot size and so forth. Quite frankly, I like driving down neighborhoods where you have large homes and you have small homes. You drive down my street. I live in probably one of the smallest homes in my street. And there's larger homes, and then there's smaller homes. I'll tell you, Mr. Burt's comments on 7,000, 30% square foot max, I kind of like that. But I will say this, when a developer looks at this video, I hope that they sort of target something in that area with a lot of diversity. I don't know how the others feel. I mean, I certainly, if we need to, really state it in or revise the RFP to 7,000, 30% max. I don't know how the others feel about this. I'll be willing to do that. But I still want as much flexibility as possible, and knowing that we can still reject projects that come up to us. But just know that I want the neighborhood to know about the 7,000, how I feel about the 7,000 minimum and 30% maximum. Lastly, the affordable element. I heard the comment earlier by Councilmember Marquez about, making the preference, given the developer the flexibility to come up with a plan. While I am inclined to go that way, I really, really do believe we need to keep affordable on site, keep affordable on this lot. I do not, and this is something that I struggle with personally, while I do support on projects, and I have voted for projects where we have taken the in lieu fee and applied those dollars in other places, my big concern is that we start segregating affordable elements, and we get neighborhoods that are completely isolated and segregated along class lines. And, are ADUs the answer? To be quite honest with you, I don't see ADUs as the solution to meeting the affordable element. If building smaller houses will get us to the affordable element, I'd like to build smaller houses. Let's keep, let's stay committed to building affordable on site. And to be quite honest, I don't know, this is, developers can work this out, but I would even like to increase the affordable element as long as they're smaller homes. I don't mind doing that. So anyways, I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to move it right now, but I do want to hear what my colleagues have to say. Those are sort of my initial comments right out the gate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mendel.
Thank you, Mayor. So, a few things. I heard a number of you. I've met with a number of you recently. Met with a number of you many years ago. Colleen, I've forgotten your name, but I remember being at your house, and I remember meeting you and Tom and Bernadette and talking about Bunker Hill and how that should be developed. And that was 5 years ago. I've had other conversations. Debbie, I think I came to your house once, probably during a political campaign, and we chatted about what was going on and what you wanted to see up there. And my point in saying this is that I personally, and I think the council as a whole, has been listening to you for a very, very long time and trying to get as clear an understanding of what the folks in the community want as we possibly can. And that knowledge has helped to guide our decision-making process at a variety of points along the way. And I know that's true personally because I'm in my own head. But if you look at it, you look at what's going on the rest of town, every place in town, every single new development is more dense than what is existing around it currently. In the downtown, we have 2- and 3-story buildings that have existed there for a long, long time. And what's getting built? 4-, 5-, 6-story buildings. Along Mission Boulevard, it's 1 to 3 stories. Those are getting torn down and replaced with 4- and 5-story buildings, 3 to 5 stories. In my neighborhood, I live in a single-family neighborhood, but what's being built around it, not single-family homes, it's townhomes and 4-story apartments. This is in response to the housing crisis that the Bay Area and California as a whole is suffering from. And there is a need for more housing. And there is a need, quite frankly, for all of us and all the communities and all the neighborhoods in town to do their part by accepting more density than currently exists in the neighborhood. My neighborhood is not immune. The folks who live in downtown, they're not immune. Along Mission, not immune. There are no neighborhoods that are immune, and neither will Bunker Hill and the surrounding streets be immune. But there is a balance to be struck there, right? If we asked developers what they wanted to build, I guarantee you the very first thing that would come back would be townhomes on 3,000 square foot lots. That's what they're building all over town. And anytime we ask them, that is the first request. Can we build townhomes there? You're not getting that. That's not what we're talking about. We're not even close to that. It's because we've been listening for years and trying to steer this in a direction that will preserve the character of the neighborhood while still creating additional units that are much needed. That's hard, right? It's a balance because there's competing interests, and we're struggling with that. But you've been heard. It just happened early. And so, we didn't come out of the gate with townhomes and you had to fight us back. We sort of came out of the gate with what we thought was a reasonable compromise based on listening to you for many, many years. So I hope you can hear the sincerity in my voice and understand that the process actually has worked well in this case. Not perfectly. You're not going to get everything you want. It just doesn't work that way, especially when there's 2 different groups asking for completely opposite things. We cannot satisfy everyone, but we are trying. So with that, I actually think that what staff has put together, you've done some great work. I've heard lots of compliments from folks about, Ms. Ott and Mr. Stefanski as I've met with them. And I really appreciate that. It's really helped a lot. What you've put forward is a good framework. as Councilmember Salinas pointed out, it is not the end. This is the sort of the bookend. You know, we're sort of identifying the most dense option available, which is pretty darn close to what's there now, but a little bit denser, right? That's not too bad. You compare that to downtown where, you know, 5-story buildings are going up next to 2-story buildings. You know, you're not getting that. So I look forward to seeing what comes of this. I think a lot of the specific suggestions that were made tonight were good ones, but they're things that don't need to get resolved tonight. You know, the trail access and the sequencing of the roadway construction. Those are things that will get worked out as, you know, the plans come farther along. And they were good suggestions, so I want to acknowledge them. And you know, staff is nodding their heads. That, you know, they'll get incorporated. And I hope there's a follow-up conversation with Mr. King about his specific suggestions, because there were some good ones in there as well. And those will work their way out later in the process, not tonight. So with that, I'm just going to move the item, and thank you for listening to the long explanation. Yeah.
So the staff recommendation has been moved by Councilmember Mendel and seconded by Councilmember Zermeño. Councilmember Zermeño?
All right, a couple of comments first. First, I do agree with my colleague Salinas that this is really an RFP. Things will change, things will be modified. The actual project or the plan is to include members of the Bunker Hill to be part of the interview committee. I think that's extremely important. I do agree also with my colleague Mendel in that we have listened. And there was another group also that was pushing for affordable housing, not just today, but in previous meetings and other emails and conversations over the phone, that they actually wanted us to come in and start solving the crisis in housing that we have by putting condominiums or townhomes up there, and that they would be affordable. And to me, that really wasn't what you were saying or what the area really needed. I think there would have been a revolution, for example, if we had come in with something like that. I do believe in the rural aspect of the area. I've been up there several times and actually ran when I was running. I used to run up those hills, so I know those. And we do want to keep it green, so that's the other aspect. So thank you for Mr. King, who actually had specific points as to what needed to be done there. The electrification of the project is good. I like that. I do like the 30% lot coverage. I think it's a good one. 30, 40, but I think 30 is fine because it allows for more open space. I don't know if it will be possible, but someplace in the RFP, maybe there can be a space between the homes so that if I'm a deer and I want to go down the hill, I don't have to go around the houses. I don't know if that's possible. Little opening, that may be possible. And that was brought up by, I think, Debbie, but I'm not sure of the name. So that's important. Again, the RFP should talk about the gate, should talk about, the entry up above. The two creeks are very important. I will go along with our staff recommendation of 5 to 20 with an average of 20. And again, I'm in agreement with my colleague Salinas, is that this allows for variety of offers, a variety of homes. It can be a small house, it can be a large house, which is what you have in that particular neighborhood because all their houses are different. Colleague Mendel states that he lives in a single family area. So do I. We don't have He's surrounded by condos. I'm not. I'm over by Sleepy Hollow. We missed our hospital, but we don't have any new projects that are going to be huge among us. So I'm lucky in that particular respect. And so are you, because nobody's going to build around your place. We're maxed out. Anyway, colleague Marquez mentions the fact that let's allow the developer to come back with some ideas about affordable. I'm not too impressed with the ADUs. I never have been. I don't know. Maybe there can be a smaller house built up there where the affordable is at that particular area. The house doesn't have to be 5,000 square feet. Maybe it can be smaller. So that's a possibility. Let's see if they can be courageous or creative. The green development, it's fine. I love it. Let's see, sidewalks. Okay, I think that's all. All right. No natural gas. I love it. Let's see. Okay, and I think that's the reason that I'm seconding the motion. I don't have any friendly amendments either, so I think we're okay. Not yet? Okay, there may be friendly amendments to it. Okay, all right. Thank you all in the community coming out. Thank you for the coffee that we shared. And staff, excellent work. And when do we expect this to go out, and where do we expect a response?
So following tonight, we'll have the RFP be released tomorrow. It'll be up on our website, and then proposals will be due on Wednesday, August 28th. So it'll be about 7-ish weeks for developers to respond.
All right, and then how sure are we that there will be access through Carlos B? Nice wide access, because that's 200 cars that we're going to be coming through.
There's still work to be done on that. There's portions of that the university still, CSU owns, and so we are in conversations with them about that, and we'll be working very hard. And, staff will be working hard on trying to gain that access.
Right. Yeah,
we think it's very important.
Yeah, we heard loud and clear that that's an access that's very important. And if it comes back to us without an access on Carlos B, I will vote no on it, on the project. So that's my promise. Okay, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Lamnon.
Thank you. Again, thank you to everybody who came out, and to our city staff who've been working to engage the community. So I also really appreciate that the community members will be part of the RFP vetting process. That's genius, and thank you for doing that. So I actually do have a friendly amendment, because I'm me, which is a small one, but I think gets to the spirit of what Councilmember Salinas was saying, and I think what this council has voiced. So I'm all for flexibility, but what I really have said over and over again, and was said tonight, is about the affordable on-site. And so for that option B, so if the preferred option is ADU, that's fine. For option B, that there be language in there that say, including, that there's a preference for the affordability to be on-site. So I asked that the maker and the seconder.
Isn't that already included?
No.
I mean, I agree with it, but.
Yeah, the kind of open-ended option doesn't say specifically on-site, and I think it's a great suggestion. We can just say, including on-site units. So if they're going to propose something different, then they've got to propose something that includes on-site units. It could be on-site and fee, but that there's some element of on-site affordable housing. I think staff are fine with that.
So am I.
Okay. Francisco, is that okay? Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you both. To Councilmember Salinas' point, yeah, I mean, maybe some of those are duplexes or so on. I share the concern about the character, and I think a lot of that has been addressed, actually. I'm just a little confused. So I thought that sidewalks weren't allowed, but the we have talked about sidewalks being part of the development. So could you just clarify that?
Yeah, we chatted with the Development Services Department. I mean, they are allowed, and we're encouraging them, especially if you are wanting to encourage alternative modes of transportation and people getting out of their cars and allowing them to walk safely to places. I mean, granted, it's up on a hill, but even being able to walk, sidewalks are an important part of that. And so we have confirmed that they are allowed.
Okay, thank you. I think there were some really good comments about, from Councilmember Mendel and some of the folks in the audience, about, relooking, and as you said, relooking at Harder Road, looking at connectivity between some of the streets, obviously Carlos Bay. I'm going to have a really hard time, and I'm not inclined to support a project that comes back with a full complement of 70 to 80 units without another road. That does not feel safe to me. I'm all on board with the need for more density, but the Central and Maitland and Central and Westview corners worry me a lot. And I think, so I'll leave it at that. But so that's the assurity, and I ask the development community to work on that and to work with staff on that. And also maybe some larger driveway aprons is also a possibility, just to get some of the cars off the road. Just put that in there. And the last thing that I'm a little concerned about, and doesn't need to be finished tonight, but I think we need to think about putting all of the responsibility for the riparian and other protected areas on this new set of homes. That doesn't sort of help with affordability, but it's also, everybody's been using this area for a long time. And so to the extent that if they belong to HARD, then how much of that maintenance can be done? Certainly there is that added benefit because you live right next to it, so I get that, but I think we need to think through, does some of it come from development? Does some of it come from our existing tax base? I don't know what the right mechanism is there, but I'm concerned about having a GAD and a lighting district and a riparian zone district, and suddenly this really expensive home is astronomically expensive. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just really impressed with everyone tonight. This has been a great discussion. It feels kind of like a work session, but it's not, but it's been very productive. So first, thank you to staff. Thank you to all the community members that have come and spoken up, have sent emails, have called us. Echo a lot of the same comments made by my colleagues. We have been listening. It is a difficult position we're in. We're trying to strike that balance of addressing the housing crisis while still preserving the rural nature of this specific neighborhood. So at this juncture, I will be supporting the motion. I strongly encourage staff, when they launch the RFP, to include the link to this meeting as well as the Planning Commission, actually make it a requirement that the applicant has to watch this. Minutes do not do it justice. And quite frankly, you need to be in the room because, there's a lot of our communication is nonverbal. So I won't call anyone out, but there are developers in the room, so hopefully they're paying close attention, taking good notes. I agree with the amendment. I would like to see or clarify the request from the Hayward Collective with regard to right of refusal. Is that written anywhere in the RFP? If not,
are you referring to the ADUs or any on-site affordable units?
On-site affordable units.
So we could, we can add something that, and this is actually something that we would work with, as I think there was a question about who monitors. It would be the city. Any units that are created under affordable housing ordinance are monitored by us, by the housing division, and so we can work with the developer. It's more the city to make sure that we're reaching out to those tenants that were transferred from the site to provide them with some opportunities. But it kind of depends on what type of units you have there and whether or not it makes sense. But we can add that.
And if that language could be across the board for all the parcels, not specific to just the one we're discussing tonight. And then just, I'm going to stay true to my nature, what I did in the past when we had the early conceptual review of the Sohei project. I made it very clear to earn my vote what I was looking for, so I'm just going to state it now so it's not, any discrepancies or confusion there. But I just noticed something on social media, and in American Canyon, I don't know the name of this, but I'm reading that there's 70 permanent affordable homes for veterans and seniors. They're cottages. So it can be done. So I really want to push. I don't like the ADU component at all. I really want to see item number 2, as much creativity as possible from the developer and to exceed our current housing element. And the comments I made earlier in terms of community benefit from this parcel, it's not just the on-site housing, but the proceeds going towards the development of South Hayward. So we are being mindful of that. And if we just can continue to do that, that's going to be really, really important. But I really want to see the affordability, moderate home ownership on-site. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wahab.
Thank you. Just to also just inform everybody that the first right of refusal is something that I've requested actually to be on the housing subcommittee. It's something that I'd like across the board for basically everything we do in the city. I think that's the fair thing. I just want to say I do appreciate community input. It's something that helps inform us. I will also say that nobody's ever happy with any decision that is made fully. I fully support Mr. King's statements on the environmental aspects of this particular parcel. I would even go a little bit further and request that that a good portion, when we are developing any of the housing, that it be kind of a little bit more consolidated in one area that allows a little bit more open space, because if we were to spread out the homes even further, you kind of reduce that, especially when you have potential walls and so forth. And I did want to ask, and I know every home that is created has a fence. Do we have to have a fence? Is there are there any other type of new style? Yeah.
No, you don't have to.
And I'm not sure how you guys feel about that. For new, I just don't understand why we have to fence everything out. Even if we use trees or some other, more earth-friendly, animal-friendly.
And there are properties in the hills that use natural landscaping as dividing. And if you travel on the East Coast, most of the houses don't have fences between them at all.
And I love the East Coast, so let's do something like that. I'd like to see that. Some of the other things that I wanted to ask is that I also don't really fully support ADUs. I think it's one of those things that look nice on paper, but in actuality, in practice, it doesn't really work, because one, it costs on average about $200K to build one, and that's just ridiculous in itself. I will say that my childhood home was on a rough about 6,000 square foot home, a little bit more, a little bit or so, and I absolutely love the backyard because we had about 20 trees: apple, pomegranate, peach, lemon, you name it. You had enough place to kind of sit out there, play on the grass with your dog, ride your bike, the whole nine. I personally think that's enough. And I know that you guys want the 10,000 square foot lots as an average. I think that's excessive. And especially in the time that we have a housing crisis and a shortage of housing, we always hear, there's the one prong that I always talk about is renters' protections and tenant rights, and just the renters in the city. The other piece is development and preservation, and there's many, many layers to housing. I don't think it's right to go 7,000 and above. I genuinely do not think that's appropriate in this time. So I would be very much against that. 30 to 40% maximum lot coverage, that's something that I think it's 30 to 40%. I'm fine with either, even a mixed of if it's a little bit more or a little bit smaller. I also agree that it's going to be 2 stories, and that's really the way it is. I have no problem with single-family homes because I understand that our city is very diverse and we need to serve the needs of many different groups of residents. Townhomes and those tri-story homes and things like that, I'm not personally a fan of, unless, I've stated to our city manager in many, many conversations, if they're a flat where it's very large as 1 story, and then on top of that, a second person's unit and so forth. I support something like that, especially with elderly parents or multi-generational households, things like that. I respect a different way of development, and I have not seen that in the Bay Area, even though the demographics are significantly shifting. More people are living with their parents and even their children, so 3 generations can live in a home. In Gilroy, they've created homes that have 2 master bedrooms and 2 laundromats in the home, which I was like, oh, that's pretty cool if you're going to live with your mom or dad or something like that. Need some space too, right? Right? Yeah. So I find it baffling that we cannot produce a better transportation roads and just walking paths and I hear the reasoning of the slope and the steepness, but we put pools on the edge of cliffs, right? How the hell do we do that and we can't do this? I do think that if it's a little bit more of a work ethic in that aspect, I think that we can actually solve the problem. I do think that there needs to be multiple paths. I will say that Ms. Gersney's comments, I've walked her neighborhood. Their biggest problem is parking and sidewalks, and I think that's on the other side, different places of the hill. And I have a cousin that lives there where you can't even park in front of her home. There is no sidewalk. It's supposedly a 2-lane street, and if you drive a crossover, you cannot even get through the street. I just genuinely don't know how. And I'm going to say it, as my father has consistently told me, the city of Hayward does not have the greatest feng shui. So I really want to work on the feng shui of specifically the areas that, to me, this is an opportunity. So I do take home is that I think that the lots are way too big. I want to preserve the wildlife as much as possible. I think that the amount of homes is way too small. 74, I'm going to say that, 74 units is nothing. On 37 acres of land, that is a disservice to the larger community. It's a disservice to our future generations, and it's a disservice in the housing crisis in itself. So I would never support anything like that. And I do want to say that the tenants that were there, I do think that you guys handled it very, very well. I know that it's seen in a certain way, but they've had a number of years, multiple offers, multiple chances. I think that, it's sad it happens, but I think that we handled it as appropriately as possible, and I commend you guys all for your patience and your effort on even the most difficult pieces. I would like to know that some of the comments that I made, and I understand that we have some feedback from the developers, how much of a potential would we get if we were to reduce some of these thresholds?
Which threshold, or just in particular?
Instead of 10,000 square foot lot average being a lot smaller, even if we designate even a portion of the parcel to higher density housing, and I do think that that's an option for me personally, and the reason why is because we do have students, we do have people that that we could utilize the space a little bit differently than what it's originally for. The general plan, I will say that considering that it's been done almost 6 years ago, the individuals that serve to partake in that general plan have actually reached out to me and saying that they would have liked to update it as they move along. Housing has greatly differed. We know that these homes, I know you guys say you guys don't know the average cost. It's going to be $1 million plus. It's on a hill and it has a huge lot. So let's not fool ourselves. We are making homes for very wealthy individuals, and I think that I would like a little bit more of a mixed use for this particular parcel and all parcels. I'm not satisfied with this parcel. I do not support this the way it is currently.
So is that just a comment, or is there a question?
A question to the 10,000 square foot and also a potential mixed segment that is higher density in one little portion of the parcel.
So the thing, we've done environmental analysis consistent with the general plan, and the addendum is to the general plan EIR, the environmental impact report. And so to the extent the densities you're talking about aren't consistent with the general plan, and we would have to redo that environmental review analysis if we propose something that isn't consistent with the general plan.
How long would that take?
It could take a long time depending on how, you're talking, and the number of units. So if we studied a certain number of units, if you wanted to densify pretty significantly and change that, and we'd have to look at it whether or not we would have to do an environmental impact report or a mitigated negative declaration. But if it's an environmental impact report, you're looking at almost 12 months because you have to go through a very specific process. If it's a mitigated negative declaration, maybe 6 to 9.
Even if you were to take 20% of the entire parcel?
Yeah, if we're not consistent with the general plan, we can't rely on the environmental impact report that was certified as part of the general plan, and so we'd have to do our own analysis. And we've gone through the checklist related to the general plan, but it would take a lot longer and cost more, and we'd have to do it differently.
More work, huh?
Yeah, it's more work to comply with CEQA, I guess.
And it would also, the delay, we do have a deadline with Caltrans in terms of selling the properties by 2023, so it also would create delays around that as well.
So 4 years from now. Okay. I still, feel the way I do. It doesn't change that.
Thank you. Councilmember Salinas, as my predecessor, Mayor Sweeney, would have said, you want another bite of the apple?
Yeah.
Make it a small bite, okay?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate to staff, I do hope, developers will see this video, right? And really look and really come back with a creative plan for on-site. That's what I want to focus. That's what I really want to emphasize is the on-site affordable.
Does the council want to get rid of the ADU option altogether?
No,
we should.
I don't.
Or you just want to leave the ADU option, maybe not say it's preferred, and then just keep that other option, and then maybe add, say, including on-site.
Keep on-site, yeah.
And maybe encourage creativity, and
I would like to point out that cottages are ADUs. Cottages are also
ownership. That's the difference. Home ownership is the point I was getting at with those.
Well, okay, but ADUs can come in a variety of forms. I'm sorry, Councilmember Salinas, what you're going to say?
Well, I agree. I'm looking at home ownership. I am not going to buy an ADU in someone's backyard. Okay, and when we look at this, and it goes back to some of the even some of the aspects of the neighborhood right now, and some of the older neighborhoods we can walk through today. You see large homes and you see really, really small homes. And so I want to see that diversity. That's the spirit. Whether we have to articulate it, I don't know whether we need to change the motion or the second. I hope that's the spirit that's caught in this conversation. That's my point.
I think we understand.
As the mayor, I think I agree, and I think that the clear priority here is for on-site affordable units. The ADUs was offered as a way to achieve that, not as the goal itself, even, right? So Yeah, if we want to change the language saying, to take the preferred off the ADU and make it clear, very, very clear that we want them on site, leaving that open to however they want to propose to do it, right?
If we can do that without getting gnarly with it, I'll do that.
And I think we can
straightforward.
I think we can trust staff to come up with that language. It's pretty clear. You okay with that, Councilmember Zemino? Yeah.
Are you going to propose that tonight when we?
So I just accepted that as an amendment to the motion.
Okay.
Sorry, that's what I was trying to do.
Okay. And Councilmember Zemino?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm also pleased to see the Bunker Hill neighborhood heads nod. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
I'll be brief. So, I didn't state earlier, other colleagues have stated it, but for me also to earn my vote on this project, it's going to be very, very important that we have the access point just for public safety, for traffic. So I think everyone's hearing that loud and clear. And then in regard to the affordable housing, I'd also like to see the developers propose 2 to 3 options, not just one. What are their creative ideas? Don't just give us one. Give us 2 to 3. Maybe we can figure out what works best, but one is not going to cut it. Thank you.
Okay. Actually, this has taken a long time, but it has been a good discussion. I would agree. We have listened for a long time and looked at this parcel very carefully. I want to read from the very first paragraph of the executive summary of the RFP. The last sentence of that paragraph says, future development on Parcel Group 5 should maintain a rural character marked by hillside open space that invites and retains existing wildlife and minimizes impacts to the adjacent existing neighborhood. So just want to assure, that is one of the first things that people looking at this RFP are going to read. And I think that's important, and I think there's a lot else in here. Yeah, we're looking for creativity, and I think we're offering some flexibility, and I think the amendments have been well taken. I actually live in this area fairly close, not close enough to have to recuse myself from this discussion, but I live close to another parcel, Parcel 5, and we're talking about, I'm sorry, yes, I can't get those numbers. We're talking about 5 tonight. I live close to Parcel 6, right across Carlos B. And talk about density being proposed in a neighborhood that right now is maybe not quite as rural as yours, but is a pretty, has nice, I don't know what the lot sizes are, but it's a single family development with relatively large houses, and we're looking at just up the hill from us some really intense density, which I'm not opposing, but Councilmember Mendel put it very well that this is lower than anything we have looked at in a long, long time, really even including Stonebrae. But it is a special area. It does have wildlife. I watched 4 deer, a family of 4 deer walking down our street the other day. And I really, my husband and I just stood there watching them, hoping that they were going to make it to wherever they were going up on that street and not get hit by a car. When a car came along, one of them had to run off. We were worried. And I just, we see wildlife, the turkeys too. Where are they going? Where are they going to go? There are already 4 houses, the 4 houses that we approved a few years ago being built right there at Overlook in Carlos B. And then we're looking at the Quarry area. We're looking at the Bunker Hill development. It's sad, but that is what cities are. Cities are wildlife displacers, unfortunately, and people habiters. And so I think there's been a lot of compromise in the development of the RFP, and there's a lot of flexibility. But I actually also would like to offer an amendment along the lines or in a similar way of what was offered about the the preference for on-site affordable. I would like to offer a preference for maintaining the 30% maximum coverage, but also that there could be some flexibility under, extenuating circumstances, but that just have it stated that that is the preference. But I think what that means is going up higher, perhaps, too, and have views to think about. So, when you're not building out, you're going to probably build up. But just to put that in, that I think the 30% lot coverage would be a preference. Is that acceptable?
I'm sorry, no.
No?
No.
Okay.
I think that the 40% is the maximum, where there's going to be opportunities later on through negotiation and the application where we can still lower that. But I think as a maximum, I think that's where we need to be right now.
But
the 40% coverage.
But the way it's stated right now, does it just mention 40%?
We say 30 to 40, but 40% is the maximum.
Right. So why are you objecting to saying that it is preferable to keep to a 30% lot coverage, but allowable potentially up to 40%?
Because that's not my preference.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well.
Sorry.
Okay. Well. Yeah, sorry, I really tried to do, I think that would be a better way to put it. I don't know if to think about if I'll support the motion at this point now, but probably will, because most of the rest of it is there. So with that, I will call for a vote.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Councilmember Zermano stated on average 20,000 square feet. That's what was stated. So I just want to make sure that our motion is pretty much the recommendation here on this on the sheet. Okay.
Correct.
I'm sorry. What he
made a mistake. Yeah, he misspoke.
Oh, yeah. What did you say?
He said 20,000.
I think what I said was from 5 to 20,000, and then an average of 10,000, which is what the staff is recommending, correct? 5 to 20 with an average of 10.
That is what staff is recommending.
So the recommendation, not what was said. Okay.
Right. That's what the motion is.
And Mayor, if I may, 30 to 40 is okay. As far as lot coverage.
Well, all I was asking to add is that we would prefer. We have a preference for the 30%.
Yeah. And we'll see what 30% they come back maximum. With, because it can be modified once these folks come back, or the developer, one or two come back, and we can talk about it somewhere then. Okay.
And I would just add that ADUs do provide affordable housing. One of the things we hear a lot are that people are upset we don't have enough housing in the area because we do not have, that people's kids are having to move out of the area because there's no place to live. And, ADUs do provide that unit within a unit. And also, this Bunker Hill is right next to Cal State, as we know. And I can tell you there are very large houses being built in my neighborhood right now that I am quite sure are going to end up being bought by someone who will rent them out to students because single families I don't think are even that big anymore to occupy one of them. So I do think when you're building larger houses, you are also providing more affordable housing because more people can live in them. And we see that happening all through the city, that more people are crowding into houses. So this gives them space. So anyway, I will, yes, all right, I'll call the question.
Sorry.
And the motion passes with 6 aye votes and 1 no vote. Our next item, thank you everybody. Our next item is